Afternoon, guys. Hope you had a good day wherever you are in the country or in the world. It's afternoon here, so we're just running up a 3406C. This is an engine I ran for an hour or so yesterday, so I just thought I'd give a bit of a rundown as to what we do here. I've done in a few other videos, but I'll try and go into a little bit more detail in a few other spots here and there. So as you've seen before, we do we record the screen when we do our videos. We've got a couple of cameras around. This one right here is looking at the gauges. Got our one here that does the dyno room. Looks in from the control room, which is that view there. I think we might even have a bit of a glowing turbo on this video. These 3406Cs run pretty hot in exhaust temps, so especially this one. We're at nearly 400 horsepower on this one at 1800, so she's got a bit of torque. Got our usual suspects, the oil pressure. Up the top there is water temperature, oil temp. Main things I do when I'm running these engines, or any engine for that matter, is I consider the vital signs, what I consider vital signs. So the three vital signs which I look for in case of a failure is my crankcase pressure there, which is my manometer. I have an electronic manometer, but I prefer the capillary one because it's a lot more instant and you can kind of see things happening a little bit better than the electronic one, which goes via Bluetooth, and it's sort of got a bit of a delay and sort of shuffles around a little bit, whereas the manometer, the water manometer, is much more sort of, I suppose, you get a bit more feel for it. You can see if things are sort of going a bit wayward a bit easier. Well, that's what I find anyway. So the other critical one is obviously oil pressure. That's one I'm always keeping an eye on, always sort of having a bit of a glimpse over. That thing can start doing some funny stuff, obviously, if we're having some issues inside. And the water temperature. So I consider those three the critical ones. The manometer obviously also pick up with crankcase pressure. I can sometimes see the breather and I'm looking for any sort of things going on there. Normally around a third of the horsepower onwards is when you start talking about piston failures, if you've got some misalignments with piston cooling jets and things like that. So yeah. So as I said before, we control the throttle and the dyno set point. There's a few other options which I can do. I can make this dyno sort of run itself, or I can set, instead of having direct control, I can set the throttle, set the RPM, and then adjust the load accordingly, and the computer will try and keep the RPM where you want it, or likewise with load or torque. A few different options, but I tend to just, once again, a bit old school, I tend to stick with the feel rather than actually sort of letting the computer sort of drive things. So yeah, that's sort of the control room. I'll come out now, we'll go out into the engine. I think we might just do a quick vid where I actually start it up. So just having a look over a few things here. She's, like I said, we ran her up yesterday. Had to adjust some fuel out of it. Had to up the RPM a little bit. The revs were a little bit low. This is going into a mud pump application, so don't want to have a lot of high horsepower out of this thing because it's going to be out in the desert working pretty hard. So try to go for a bit more longevity rather than heaps of power to start with. I know that I do get some comments on the video which, why is that engine so low on horsepower? And it's mainly just due, obviously, because we're running industrial engines here and we want to see them go for a while. What's up, Nat? What are you up to? Making a YouTube. It's my cousin Nat. Yeah, so I already explained about Mr. Squiggle. So it's all raring to go. Have a bit of a sight. I'll put a bit of cork in there so that black bit of cork actually floats up and down, so it sort of gives me a bit of indication if I've got any blown head gasket or something. I normally get bubbles up there, or of course it's good to keep an eye on to make sure that we're full. I've also got the Murphy here, which I should have it plugged in, which I don't, but that's just for an alarm. It's sort of like an extra backup that we have just in case we can't see the cork. So on those bigger engines like the V16, the 3516s, which we run with Mr. Squiggle off to the side, we can see it, but when we run the 3512s, it's a little bit harder to see. So I'll just plug that in a second. I'm just going to sit there. So yeah, it's sort of pretty handy to have. I'll put that down and run that up. So anyway, this engine is pretty much ready to start, so I'll just click that in. Sorry guys, no editing required here. So now we are good for a start. So we're in the run position. I'm running the stop solenoid there, so I'm actually running power to this to power to run. Come in here, we'll press the record button. So now we're about to start recording the screen. Turn the ignition on, got my fuel on, and away we go. A couple other things I just check for when we first do a start. Okay, our oil pressure's up now. Water temp's sort of setting cold because this is actually just a fresh start for today, so she's been sitting nice and cold. Running pneumatic throttle here. Just a pneumatic throttle that we run, so just the bars go down the RPM. Looking for, it's where this camera comes in handy here. You can see if there's any sort of oil leaks, pouring out the engine or anything like that. Not that that really happens at all, but you never know. So I can just set the revs up now a little bit. Turn the RPM up, I'll just put a little bit of light load on it. As I apply the load, we're applying water through the valve up the top here. Putting water down this pipe into the dyno head, just applying a bit more water into it. So just a light 116 pounds. So anyway guys, I'll put it back to the normal video. I'll do a load test report and away we go. So any questions, send us on YouTube.